Well, we have got a surprising shift, a turn of events, a flip-flop, if you will, from Bill Gates on climate change. And everybody is reacting to it, including President Trump. So we need to talk about exactly what he has said. And I don't know, Troy, I think you're going to have some interesting takes on this.
I'm excited. I'm like, Bill Gates changing his views on climate change. This is is this April Fool's? Like, what's going on right now? You know,
I know, right? So
not what I expected this week.
this is the heading here. It says Bill Gates calls on the UN to pivot funding from climate to healthcare. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but I'm going to say some more details. He wrote an article. Now, there's a big summit coming in Brazil on the 10th. And so he wrote an article coming out before that. It is a UN summit down in Brazil on climate change. And so, or on climate. And so I want to go, before we talk about his new views and what he has said, I want to say from an interview back in 2021 with CBS, he warned about what would happen if emissions were not reduced. And he basically said it was the most urgent challenge humanity has ever faced. The most urgent challenge humanity has ever faced. And he says the death toll would be even worse near the equator, and the unrest would be global in nature. And in another interview, he said, or another time he was speaking on it, he said, the world emits over 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases. And as we keep doing that, the consequences for human life will be catastrophic, and time is running out. Wow, that is alarmism if I've ever heard it. I mean, do you think, does that sound alarmism to you?
I mean, that sounds like what I've heard from Bill Gates for decades now. But yes, it's alarmism. Yes. It's an extreme view, and I've always seen most of his views as extreme views.
Let me get into a little bit here of so there's another article here. It's from the Epoch Times, and he wrote, actually, leading up to, I mentioned, a UN climate change conference in Brazil that's coming up on November 10th. He wrote an op-ed, and here's his actual op-ed that he wrote. It's on gatesnotes.com, I think, and gives a little highlight there. It's pretty long. You can see here, I'm scrolling. I think it's 17 pages or so.
Wow.
He goes into it, but some of the highlights for what he said is, it says, while reiterating the orthodoxy that climate change will have serious consequences and will hurt poor people the most, Gates goes on to say that it will not lead to humanity's demise. People will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future. Okay. So what? So he did a big flip on that. Well, Trump spoke up.
So the title of the article should have been, I was wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And we'll get into some people who are criticizing him from, obviously, like Greta Thunberg and all that. I haven't heard a statement from her, but others in that camp obviously are not going to be happy with this. But Trump puts this out on Truth Social. He says, we just won the war on climate change hoax. Bill Gates has finally admitted that he was completely wrong on the issue. It took courage to do so, and for that we are grateful. MAGA, make America great again. So Trump speaks on it, or makes a statement on it.
Interesting.
But, I want to know your thoughts on this. Some people are saying, people were asking him, what about these people that are going to push back and that want to go, that think it's a big deal? And he says, well, I'm not saying it's not a big deal. I'm just saying we should move our focus elsewhere onto disease and welfare. And so basically poverty and disease, as he says, this is what really the focus should be on. And he wants to shift it to healthcare. And I'm going to tell you this, what I think is the surprising reason is why he wants to do that. But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that, Bill Gates has always struck me as somebody to be very cautionary around, he's never struck me as somebody that necessarily just outright trust and base your life decisions on all that kind of stuff. Yeah. He's always had strange views on certain things, but here's what I think is going to happen, Ryan. I think that Gates has just wound himself into a hole where he's obviously not going to gain following from the opposing side, but I think he's also going to lose a lot of the following he already has, and the people that agree with him. I'm like, who's going to like him after this? I don't see anybody liking him. You know what I mean? Right. And obviously, Trump, even I think beyond just a Twitter post, he said some things about it, like in person, and he was, almost like agreeing with him and like saying some positive things, I think. But from what I saw, it's like, but that doesn't mean that people are going to trust you, that just means you're going to lose. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah. So he's not a politician, but he talks about a lot of political things. So politically speaking, I think it's the wrong move. Am I happy that he's saying this now? Yes, I'm happy about that. And I think he was wrong from the start, and I think it's a good thing for him to admit it. But yeah, I don't think he's going to have an easy time moving forward.
No, and I think that the way for him is to just kind of try and change the focus altogether, which is over to healthcare. And so that's what he says is to
Right, but I think there's something like so like just diabolical in that. It's like, but here's the, like that's just like a thing where it's like who's gonna follow him? It's like,
well,
that was the problem. I know I told you that was the big problem for 30 years, and I told you that everyone was gonna die, and I told you have to. This is the most important thing. Oh, but now here's the problem, and it's like, wait. If you were wrong for 30 years, why are you right now? You know what I mean? Like, why should we listen to you now? And so I think he's really just going to lose his audience, completely.
Yeah. Well, and I think there are, the tactics that they used for the last 50 years or more or 30 years have been effective to some degree, at least in the mainstream media, to get people to think that climate change, man-caused climate change, is something we should do something about, or can even do something about, or even exists. We know climate change exists, and the climate's always changing, and there's cycles and all that. But whether humans cause it and CO2 and all that is debatable. In fact, I would say it's not debatable. But the thing is, they're saying that CO2 is actually is helpful. We have deserts shrinking. We have more forests growing. We have all, the issue is the water that these forests are going to be taking. Not
well,
the
I
issue,
will say this
clean air.
Just in context, I think we should take care of Earth, but I think you're right that science doesn't change, but people's view of science always is changing, right? Like, well, this is the best thing. No, this is the best thing. Well, you change your view because now we understand more about what's actually going on.
Yeah, and I think there is no I think that's an indefensible position, because I think it was feigning sincerity the whole entire time, including Al Gore and everybody in that camp that pretended like it was a consensus issue, when actually science is the opposite of consensus. Science is not a consensus discipline. That's like saying math is consensus. That makes no sense. But I think that what has happened is, to some degree, there's two things I think has happened. Number one, I think that the gig is up, and now that we all have access to all this information, people just don't buy it anymore. They just don't believe it. So if they want to control people through means of controlling CO2 emissions and all these kinds of things, it's just not going to work like it did before. And I think they found out during COVID, health is a lot better way to control people. And so I think
you're saying it's an issue of control. Like, that's what you're saying.
That's part of my take on this. Well, control, and for Bill Gates personally, profit. And I'm going to share that here in just a minute. But
that makes sense, because that makes a lot of sense, because it's like, okay, if people are starting to see the science, it's starting to come out, and the popular vote is moving away from global warming. Like if the populace is moving away from that, then it's like, okay, we're losing control. We got to shift to something else to be able to keep that control. That does make sense.
Exactly. So being able to control the populace. Now, I don't think they're going to let that go. I think it's probably going to be a both and, where he's going to put this other thing up on the stage, which he's already had on the stage, is this healthcare thing. But he wants to help solve poverty and disease around the world. And I will say, I'm for that. Like, I definitely want to help with that. We can't solve poverty around the world through immigration. My wife and I support ministries in India and different countries in Asia that help create economies, local economies, so they can help get businesses going, and get, even getting a 5-gallon bucket. They can have a business with that they couldn't have had before. And so
in some places. And that looks different everywhere you go. But I think you're right. That is how you fight poverty, is like you stimulate a thriving economy. It's the way you do it. And it's like, are you really doing what you say you're doing? And somebody that is now pivoting on this issue, I'm like, I don't think we could trust them on anything at this point.
We can't trust him on anything. And that's a whole nother discussion, but it's exactly relevant to this discussion. And so the thing is, though, is they want to solve. When he says healthcare, what does he really mean? Well, like I said, we want to actually solve the issues. We want to protect the nature and the earth. We want to take care of it. We want to do the right thing. But that's not what we're talking about here. In China, they have the healthcare app that was used for COVID, and it's been repurposed very quickly, like in 2020, within less than a year of when they came out with it, to control people's movement and whether they can get into their own house or not. And so now it knows where they went on the app. They got to use this app to even get into their own home. There's homelessness increase. And so there's all kinds of things that can be done with that. And we saw with Obamacare, the government getting engaged in healthcare and taking over. And it's terrible, absolutely terrible. But let's talk about Bill Gates. So he says we should pivot that funding from climate to healthcare. Well, I think it's interesting. I heard him talk one time about the greatest investment that he ever had. You know, we know when we think Bill Gates, we think of Microsoft, but he said he doesn't say that was the best investment, the best return on investment he ever had. He says the best return on investment he ever had was his investment in vaccines. And now we can go into that interview and talk about the context for that and all that. But he says his best investment is to turn 10 billion into 200 billion worth of economic benefit. And I will say, I think, you know, he has been under the gun for a lot of the things that have done in Africa, where things that have not gone well, there haven't been appropriate disclosures. There have been misleading. They have actually had lots of death and disease and all kinds of problems because of the experiments and the vaccines and all kinds of things that they were doing, where they're actually sterilizing people through vaccines, and they thought they were getting a vaccine to prevent a disease, and they were intentionally sterilizing things. And so now I want to be careful. I don't know exactly his involvement with that specific thing, but that's what we're talking about here. And being able to, you know, we talk about nanotechnology and all kinds of things with vaccines, mRNA, and this is a huge topic. And so we want to talk about control. I mean, there are lots of plans as far as healthcare and being able to control things. And we've talked a little bit about some of the things that might be coming down the pike for people, but we need to have our eyes open. And so for me, this is somewhat of a pivot, or it is a big pivot. It's a big backpedal, but he's trying to do it in a very nonchalant way. But I think he's also just kind of putting this on the table as, okay, now this is going to be something we're going to be talking about too. Keep the train going on that other part. We're all celebrating, saying, hey, everybody was already saying this. All these other climate scientists were saying this already for years, and there's going to be no gratifying admission or anything like that. I mean, this is helpful, but he's not going to connect it to the fact that he's been
right. I think you could be hitting the nail on the head with the profit side of things. I mean, because even the global stuff, I mean, the global climate change stuff that he's been talking about for decades. I mean, whose companies were getting the biggest benefit and like tax write-offs and things because they're going green? You know, it's like, well, he's aligning his companies with the political stances that he's pushing, you know, and the stances he's taking. So it's like he was getting it's like, do we get the money back, you know, now for, you know, it's like, no, you know, so I mean, that's where it just, it's not a great situation.